I pride myself in being the sort of person who's transparent, and to some degree, I pride myself in being an oversharer, in being a sensitive person, because on a fundamental level, and like literally on a foundational level, I feel like the world needs more people who are sensitive, people who hurt, people who cry, people who feel deeply, because life is hard and the world is hard, and we need some softness, we need some gentleness, and we won't find it in a fancy hotel room. We will not find it in the arms of the lovers we pick and drop like fruit, and we'll not find it in the jobs that we think make us who we are because they give us titles. We find it in human connection, because the quality of our lives is really determined by the quality of our relationships. I've heard Esther Perel quote that, and I don't know whether that's her original thought or whether she's gotten it from a secondary source. It's exactly 1 week since my relationship of about 16 years ended. I turned 36 in a few weeks, and to say that this has messed me up completely is an understatement. The relationship ended while I was cleaning a house in Berlin, and I haven't held a job in almost 2 years because I landed in Germany and had a proper depressive episode that had me struggling to get out of bed. And because I needed culturally appropriate care, and I am a very self-aware person, I got in touch with a psychologist from my home country, Kenya. And she helped me a lot. She helped me develop some tools. Ruby Meseda taught me that I'm only human. Like literally taught me, because I'm a parentified child and I've attached my value to productivity like very many Africans have, very many humans. We are made to feel as if we're good because we can do or we can give. I've been doing some research that's centered on black immigrants in Germany, and my God, black people are struggling out here with their physical health, their mental health, their financial well-being, invisibility, and racism-related stress. And you'd think that the racism-related stress is just tied to immigrants living abroad, international students studying abroad, people working abroad away from home. But I now realize, even as I speak right now, like a lot of this stress still exists back home in Kenya. There are certain expectations that people have of us when we're in the city and they're in the village, and they feel that we have better opportunities, and they do. And all I can think is black tax. The fact that I had to define that for my university professor, who is very well traveled and is a white female, literally this week, and she's in her 40s, it shook me to the core that she doesn't even know what this means. Not because I have little regard for her or anything. Like, it shocked me that she enjoys the privilege of never having to send money home and feeling obligated to. And well, that's actually not entirely true. I know she has older parents who she cares for deeply, and she's mentioned them in class. So she probably does send money home, and it's called something different. But if you look at the fact that we don't have white privilege, and we don't have let's say many of us don't have generational wealth. I'm talking to the average African. I'm talking to the person who had to borrow money to come study in Germany, not the one who actually had the blocked account amount like I did. I have some privilege because my partner brought me here, and we had some arrangement around what would happen if we stay together and what would happen if we broke up. And side note, have those conversations and have them every year, because people change, priorities change, relationships change. I'm not who I was 1 year ago. I'm not who I was 2 years ago. You're not who you were in your marriage at the beginning. I've been listening to a divorce lawyer. I forget his name, but he's a shark. And he's been featured on Diary of a CEO. And he says, marriage always ends. Every marriage will end. It either ends in death or divorce. With the divorce rate being about 56% in America right now, it literally makes no sense to get married unless for religious reasons. And I thought I didn't want to get married until I learned that my partner had intentions to propose. But there were certain things that had kept coming up in our relationship. Things that didn't make him or me bad people, but things that made us a bad fit for each other. Would I do it again? Yes. I love hard, and I know I was loved. I have no questions about that. And one of the hardest things to make peace with is the fact that love is not enough. Love is not enough if you don't espouse the same values. Love is not enough if you're not on the same page around finances. It's not enough if one of you really seriously does want a child and the other seriously does not. Love is not enough if you haven't had conversations around if you have kids with special needs. Love is not enough. Sometimes it's not enough to survive a miscarriage, and sometimes it's not enough to survive an abortion. Sometimes love is not enough to survive weight loss or weight gain or an eating disorder or a mental health diagnosis. Sometimes love is not enough to power you through issues with in-laws. Sometimes love is not enough to help if one of you has childhood trauma that keeps coming up. Sometimes love is not enough when you're a workaholic. Sometimes love is not enough when you've found your calling and you know what your ikigai is and your partner doesn't. Sometimes love is not enough because you believe very different things about the connection of the body and the mind and the spirit. Sometimes love is not even enough when you're both Christians or you're both Muslims, because you can still be unequally yoked. It's a favorite phrase for Christians because the Bible talks about do not be unequally yoked with non-believers. I think someone should have sent out a memo explaining that non-believers of your personal principles. Like if we could both be Seventh-day Adventists, because I'm Seventh-day Adventist, but we don't espouse the same principles around eating, around what it means to keep the Sabbath, around what is okay to do and what not to do on the Sabbath, around how to spend money, how to save, where to live, whether or not to have children, how many. I, for instance, am pro-choice. And I was pro-life, I think, theoretically, until I met girls who'd gotten pregnant at the age of 9 and 10, and I realized no one's ready to be a parent at that age. Until I started working with women who had postpartum depression that persisted 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 years after the baby. When I realized that statistically men check out and actually leave when women have kids with special needs because inherently they blame us or themselves, and they get to leave. A man will just walk out. You're the one who had the baby. You don't have that luxury. I'm very jaded right now, and I have a lot of anger towards men in general because of the ways in which I see divorce and separation affecting us differently. People have this misunderstanding that being the one who breaks up with someone sort of makes it easier for you. Sometimes by the time you've come to that decision, you've tried everything. Women are still not compensated for emotional labor in relationships. You can't pay me enough for the work I have put into my relationship. Like, there's no amount of money you can pay me for the therapy I have gone, the work I've put in therapy, because there's the amount of money you pay, and then there's the amount of emotional work you do. And it's relentless. For me to get to a place where I have this sort of emotional intelligence, it's really because it's been incredibly hard. This is the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And I'm an entrepreneur who's been in business since 2012. And entrepreneurship is hard. That's why there's so few women entrepreneurs. So few businesses make it past the 4th year. I was sat in a class this week just listening to the lecturer talk about my life, being broke, doing it not for the money, but because it's something you believe in. Losing relationships and people thinking you're crazy and getting ridiculed. And for me, it was even by my own, like my closest parent. And it was hard. And it wasn't because my mother is a bad person. My mother is an incredible person. And she was very supportive of my business. But beyond a certain point, she was like, just get a job. Like, you're not making money. And the only people who understand this are my friends who are entrepreneurs. And they are so few and so far apart. And we would have these little gatherings and have these 3-4 hour phone calls just talking about how our personal lives were suffering, how we were getting into and out of relationships or situationships because we just have no capacity to be in anything solid, because your business will always be your first child. And it hurts to hear when your partner says, that you seem to have prioritized your work over them. Because as a woman, you sit and think, so when I was cooking and cleaning and visiting your family, how was that not prioritizing you? Then late at night, when you sit alone with your thoughts, you realize that feeling. You know the feeling of someone loving you, but you're not, like, you're definitely not the top on the priority list. You're a second or a third, but you're definitely not number one. And you realize, what? This man is actually right. He will never be your number one. And he has every right to be upset about that. But then you also ask yourself, so when is it ever enough? Because you are my number 2 and a close second, because as much as I spent hours on phone building up my business, I was doing that because I wanted to contribute to the household income. I wanted to feel so fulfilled that I would come to you as a whole person at the end of a long day, celebrating personal accomplishments and feeling fulfilled. And when you feel fulfilled, you're a better lover, you're a better friend, you're better company. As opposed to if you're feeling lost because you haven't figured out what you want to do with your life, or, like the opposite is just, it's definitely not an option. And I'm rambling here. I'm really rambling because I've been in a very reflective space and I'm going through a whole lot of grief. And the reason why I'm sharing this is it's definitely not because of the likes. I mean, I do this because the people who follow my page are people I know personally, and people who will share this with someone who needs to hear it because of the work I do. I work very closely with people who are hurting. And the reason why I don't have their pictures, their testimonials on my website, because I think it is incredibly inhumane to put someone through that. Human beings are not posters. You know, I cringe when I see before and after pictures of people who've lost weight, because I think I know what it's like to have body image issues. I cannot imagine taking a before and after picture of myself so as to drive sales. It doesn't sit well with me. I think we have over commercialized the human body, and especially the female body. Well, the male body too, but the female body, it has gone through quite some beatings because we are just never enough. Skinny thick is the new thing, and I live in a world where there are men, and they will feel the right to, or the need to, express their opinions about how I look, how I eat, how I dress. And I'm a human being, so it's going to hit hard, especially if it's a day when I haven't slept enough, my business is not doing too well, I have a master's thesis I'm working on and progress is slow, I'm burnt out because I have ADHD burnout, and I've been circling the drain, literally between hyper focus on side projects and complete and utter exhaustion from pouring too much of myself into my work because I love what I do. I've said this before, but I'd like to say it again. In late 2022, I was diagnosed by a certified psychologist from Kenya, a brilliant young woman, as having ADHD, OCD, anxiety, and depression. When I hear people say that we are all on the spectrum, I get a little annoyed because it feels like an ableist statement. You see, the people who say stuff like this probably don't clean until their knuckles bleed. They probably don't stress clean when they have racing thoughts. They probably don't struggle with navigation and getting lost every single day they leave the house. People who say things like we're all on the spectrum don't know what it feels like to look at a website and be asked a question and not be able to see what is right in front of you. They don't know what it's like to have to ask for help when filling in an account number at the bank because you switch up numbers. People who say we are all on the spectrum don't know what it's like to grow up hearing that you're slow, careless, and forgetful, and then to hear it over and over from your colleagues, your lover, your boss. So you choose self-employment because you know what, you're your own boss, and you're just reducing the number of people who have opinions about your life and the chatter and the feeling of not being enough in a world that's constantly reminding us that we're not enough. The world was designed for neurotypicals, not neurodivergents. We are punished for being different. Add to that I am child-free by choice, and all the religious people who have opinions about how my life will never be complete without a baby. Someone had the nerve to say to me that the only people she knows who don't have kids are people who had a rough childhood or some trauma, like they were raised by a single mom. I was so offended on behalf of every woman alive and then every single woman alive. Unfortunate coincidence, my mom was a single mom, is still. And I don't know what marriage does for women. And I've said this before. I don't know what 21st century marriage does for the benefit of women. According to research, married women are some of the most unhappy people in the world. About 50% of postpartum depression goes undiagnosed. Men check out when they choose to check out. Women don't have that luxury. We live in a world where men admit that, and this is backed by research, if they had a chance to rape a woman and never get found out and never get caught, they would do it. And I'm not talking 50% of the men who are interviewed, I'm talking a high 80, 70. And then I live in a world where when women debate that they'd rather encounter a bear instead of a man, and I complain about the issues women go through, I complain about the fetishization of black bodies and how women will always be at the bottom barrel and therefore receive the brunt of every bad thing that happens to humanity, and how I'm advocating for women because I am a woman and I was assigned female at birth. And then someone has the nerve to go like, you really bash men? And I say yes. And they ask why, or some version of why, and I say because of my lived experience. When you've met children at the age of 10, 12, 14 who've gotten pregnant at the hands of men who are twice and 3 times their age, 10 times their age, you will hate men. 10 times or stretching it. There are men in their 60s who actually have had sex with kids who are younger than 12. And then in religious circles, it's see no evil, do no evil, sweep issues under the rug. It took me 4 years to get closure of a sexual assault that happened at the hands of a man in church who still taught in Bible study, who would still, and in fact, the reason why the case finally came forward is because he was accosted on his way to the pulpit by the pastor, the new pastor who knew what he'd done and had finally decided to do something about it because the previous pastors did not want to get their hands dirty. One of them actually said to me, oh, if it was rape, I would have told you to go to the police myself. But, you know, as a young woman, you should never let a man into your house. And I thought, my God, victim blaming. And I went to the second pastor and he just looks at me with pity and goes like, this thing has really affected you, right? And then another woman tells me, oh, he'll probably not call it out because he was a womanizer in his past life. Side note, I am of the strong opinion that there are men who should never step on a pulpit. It's actually not my opinion. This is very clear in the Bible that an elder should be a man of but one wife whose house is orderly. So if you have no reign over your children, the Bible is very clear, if you have no reign over your children, you have no business at all heading a church. I'll go a step further because this is very close to my heart. If you have abandoned children, if you have a baby mama that you are not supporting, I don't care whether you've had a church wedding after that. The Bible is clear that you have no business either starting a church or heading a church. And I've had these conversations with actual men and told them, you see this person you're looking at and talking to right now? This is who your daughter is going to turn out to be. Jaded about men, angry, mistrusting. And our anger is justified as women because we've gone through a special kind of hell just existing. And there's no hardship allowance for us. We deserve it. But it's a man's world. We're unsafe from literally everyone. The white male boss who puts his hands on your waist because he knows you'll not do anything about it, because you're desperate for the money, because you have sick parents back home, and he knows. We are not safe because my own housemate, a 20-year-old white passing man, had the nerve to send inappropriate pictures to me, and he knew nothing would happen to him. I know women who've been hit in Germany, and the men have gone scot-free. When you look at the men who go scot-free, the difference is the color of their skin. My black brothers don't get away with that kind of stuff here. And that's why I talk about race issues. I'm living it as we speak. and I have research to back it up, that racism related stress starts at the age of even as young as 3 or 4. When a child goes to school and another child tells them they're the color of poop. I'm going to let that sink in for 2 seconds. I'm very upset. Oh God, I am upset. I'm about to start work on my campus after a week of realizing how different our lives are as Black people. We sat in class and a question was asked, like, what big, you know, big deal things, I'm trying to remember the phrase and it won't come to mind, have happened in like healthcare in the past couple of years, maybe the past decade or 5 years or whatever. And the first thing I yelled out was telemedicine. And the professor goes like, but it's problematic. And I'm like, you don't understand because you're not Black. You don't understand because you're white and male and cis heterosexual. And I went ahead to explain, but in Africa, it's huge. We are just starting to enjoy the privilege of electronic health record keeping so that you don't have to walk to a hospital with your file this thick with your medical history. That's where Africa is right now. We're like literally just now getting there. These guys in Europe and the US got there ages ago in the UAE, the Arabic countries in the Middle East. Like some of these people like got there ages ago. So when I say telemedicine, it's because I know what it's like to work in a setting where a woman, this is a real life story, a woman had to sit on a motorcycle and ride about 60 kilometers to the nearest health facility because she gave birth at night and her placenta didn't come out. I've worked in hospital settings where people pay 20 cents to be able to get a file opened for them. And the medication they receive has been in storage so long you're not sure that it's still fit for use. I've worked in an education and rehab center for girls, say, from early marriage, where pads would literally go bad from storage because aid, they have to be dished out a certain way. Pictures need to be taken so that the donors can give. I hate white saviors. I hate the white savior complex so much. I hate food aid. But when it's a choice between a starving child and this food labeled USAID, you let them have the food. With the full knowledge that when we have heavy rains, as has been the case in Kenya this past couple of weeks, months, your van will not be able to cross a certain river, and people will actually not eat for days. Africa is not poor and starving and dying because we don't have resources. It's because our politicians are in the pockets of former colonizers who are still current colonizers. Colonialism isn't dead. Racism isn't dead. It's alive and well and breathing and well fed and fat and sleeping in Bavaria, Germany, and other parts of Germany, but especially here. I also heard a cis-het white man say that, yeah, contrary to what you've heard, I haven't encountered racism. And I thought to myself, how would you? You're white, male, young, good looking, skinny. You've studied in the UK, so you also speak really good English. I have no energy for white fragility. Someone I used to volunteer with back in Kenya was upset about some things I had to say about Germany and the UK having a problem with refugees. And she went on this rant, I guess. I did not care for it because it had a lot of victim blaming and a, a lot of ignorance about culture and a lot of ignorance about the psychology of men and women in conflict settings. And I did not have the energy as a black woman who is not paid enough for the work she does to start educating a white woman who told me that her family came here with nothing. And I thought, but you're white. You fit just right in. Like you literally, you just fit in. Your eyes are the same color. Your hair is the same color. You look like a German. Unless you told me, I would not know. You came from Europe. You can apply for a scholarship. There are certain scholarships I can't apply for because I am a non-EU member. I don't even know what I was ranting about, but I know I've ranted about a lot of things. But I'm in a very reflective space and I want us to think. Let us really, really think about the decisions we make and how they affect us and those around us. Before you ask that woman to marry you, before you bring that child into the world, before you walk down the aisle with that man, before you say yes, before you say no, just think. In any decision involving more than one person, think long and hard. Put yourself outside of your own self for a second. Put your ego aside for 2 minutes and ask yourself, if I were in this person's shoes, how would I want them to treat me? Then really think and then act in kindness. Everyone around us is fighting a battle we know nothing about. Just because we look put together and because we are taking huge strides at work doesn't mean we don't have internal battles, doesn't mean we don't stay up late, doesn't mean we don't have trouble sleeping. Sometimes we have enough money to cover it up. Sometimes we have enough Instagram pictures to make it look like our lives are put together. Every single person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Treat them with dignity, treat them with kindness. Don't make any assumptions. If you don't have anything kind to say, don't say it. Learn to keep your opinions to yourself. Learn to use your inside voice. Learn to be quiet and just listen. And because this is a current issue, when someone tells you their life story, when someone shares a difficult truth with you, believe them the first time. Believe black women. Believe black people. Believe LGBTQ plus people. Believe marginalized people. Believe ethnic minorities. Believe us. We are not making this stuff up. And lead with kindness. Ask to understand, not to prove a point. Listen to understand, not to react or respond. Just be quiet for 2 minutes and let this person be. Because by the time people like me put out a video like this, we are up to here. And we've had too many similar stories and we've thought, you know what, put this out there because someone needs to hear it. Be well, guys.